Greetings everyone, welcome to Narayana's. This is a part of the daily news analysis in which we select certain articles from the Hindu as well as Indian Express for detailed analysis. The articles that have been chosen are as follows. First one, COP28, much done but still not enough. It is from Indian Express, page number 14. Next, Kerala moves Supreme Court against government's cap on borrowing limit. It is from Indian Express, page number 9. Next is Center receives plan to simplify GST rate. It is from the Hindu, page number 13. Next, New Delhi Declaration on Artificial Intelligence adopted. It is from the Hindu, page number 12. Next, road fatalities rise in India despite global drop as per the WHO report. It is from the Hindu, page number 12. Now, let us start our analysis. This article is on the recently concluded COP28 in the Dubai. Many commitments might have seemed to be undertaken, but it is not the true case. It ends on an optimistic note, but many things are left untouched or not given properly shape to actually implement them. That is what we are going to see in this article. The COP28, much done, but still not enough. Relevance, final agreement on COP28 summit is what we are going to see in detail, comprehensively, and this one article covers everything that is required to deal with the COP28 summit. In the syllabus, climate change, mains, GS paper 3, environmental conservation. The previous year questions, this is very important on all possible aspects. For example, there was a green climate fund. Every year we see close to 20 questions or at least above 10 questions from the environment topic. Climate is one of the important topics. Even in the mains, clean energy in the order of the day, etc. is one such topic that have been asked. Now let us first look into the context. It is on the December 13th, the UNFCCC of COP28 has been concluded. It is a framework under which the climate-related agreements are being taken, and it gives a direction to the climate-related policies of the various countries. It's sort of a global law dealing with the climate change. The final agreement has been entered into. Certain issues have been of some prominence. For example, methane emissions. They have realized the importance of reducing the methane. At the same time, there was agreement on the renewable energy, energy efficiency, fossil fuel reduction, and the following are the arguments. First time, there was an acknowledgement for the need to move away from the fossil fuels. They have committed for transitioning from the present fossil fuel model to the model where fossil fuels are no longer required. And there is a promise to reduce methane emissions. There is a promise to operationalize the loss and damage fund. Actually, it has been operationalized as well, where certain finances have also been committed to and mobilized to. And there is an agreement on global adaptation goals, which is an important demand from the developing countries. Adaptation, as you know, is nothing but trying to cope up with the possible climate disasters, climate-related changes. There is increase in the temperatures. As you know, there are other consequences of the increased temperatures. The possibility of falling production in the agricultural crops. Similarly, the possibility of intensity in disasters. And we need a coping mechanism to actually adapt to the changes brought in by the climate change. Now, firstly, the main agenda is global stocktake. Global stocktake is nothing but the measuring of the greenhouse gases or the carbon gases that have been released into the environment. And then on the basis of which, where we are, where we have to go, etc. will be set. So global stocktake has been taken, but the problem is it is not adequate enough to actually come to the assessment. Global stocktake gives whether the countries who have set a climate goal in terms of reduction in the greenhouse gases, whether they were able to achieve that goal or not is the main reason why there is global stocktake in the first place. But that too was inadequate. So why was COP28 considered a last opportunity? It is because 2030 is somewhat considered a deadline. Already we have crossed the 1 degree Celsius breach. Of course, we have set 2 degrees Celsius as the final breach in terms of increased temperature compared to the pre-industrial levels. We have already crossed 1 degree Celsius. What to do from the 2023 to 2030 is an issue. We have to also commit reduction from now itself to actually limit the overall temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius and possibly to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And for that, we need solid commitments starting from now. Because what we are seeing is 2023 is already the hottest year ever. And out of the top 3 months in terms of the hottest months recorded, 2 have been recorded in 2023 itself. That is a cause of worry. Next, on fossil fuel outcomes, the problem is we have agreed to transition away from the fossil fuels rather than completely phasing out of the fossil fuels. We did not agree with the phasing out of the fossil fuels. And the transitioning away is of the agreement that we have to achieve net zero by 2050. Why fossil fuels is of utmost important is its share to the greenhouse gas emissions is 80%. Thus, we could significantly reduce the carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions if we tackle the fossil fuels. Of course, not only carbon dioxide, other greenhouse gases are also released by the fossil fuels. We could significantly reduce them. There is no schedule or targets in terms of phasing out of them. There are 2 dimensions in thinking about this fossil fuel reduction. One is the vulnerable island nations argue that there is a necessity to completely reduce, completely phase out. Why? Because it is the island nations, especially in the tropical regions, who are witnessing incursion of the seawater, leading to inundation in the coastal regions. The possibility of complete submergence is also high. So they are ringing alarm bells that there is a need to completely phase out. There is other dimension where the developing countries argue that they cannot completely leave out the carbon space for emissions. Still, significant proportion of the population is below poverty line and they cannot completely do away with the usage of the fossil fuels. They still require the consumption of fossil fuels. And to curb the emissions to net zero by 2050, the fossil fuel phase out is unavoidable. That is important thing. Without avoiding the usage of fossil fuels, you cannot expect to meet the goal of complete zero emissions by 2050. Next, on renewable energy and energy efficiency. The countries have committed to triple the global installed renewable energy and even increase the energy efficiency, that is the efficiency at which energy is consumed. For example, if I take 1 liter of petrol, I increase the mileage by 2%, that is increasing the energy efficiency. And doubling of annual energy efficiency is also one of the target. So this is also important target. Why? Because renewable energy is itself a substitute to the fossil fuels. So this is one way through which we could reduce the reliance on the fossil fuels. The importance is because there is a possibility of reducing the emissions of about 7 billion tons of CO2 between now to 2030. But the analysis of it is the target has been set, but the individual targets are not specified. The countries, for example, USA has to produce so and so energy from the renewable sources, etc., etc. This is a global target. It is not clear at all to what extent different countries have to contribute to the energy production to renewable sources. And it is also not necessary for every country to triple its current capacity. So if you do not clearly specify the target, how will you be able to attain it in the first place? Next, on the phase down of the coal. The coal is one of the important issue because out of all the fossil fuels, it is the coal which releases the highest in terms of proportion of the carbon or other greenhouse gases as well added to it. The phase down of the coal usage has been adopted in the year 2021 itself in the Glasgow conference. Now we are seeing the commitment to reduce the usage of the fossil fuel of coal. But the proposal is there is no new coal-fired power plant to be established. That is the proposal actually. That is, from now you should not initiate a new project that uses the coal. But this was opposed widely by the developing countries. Why? Because they still require the emission space so that they could also increase the energy production through the usage of coal. But what happened is the agreement adopted to phase down rather than completely phase out the usage of the coal. If you look at the analysis, the socio-economic development of the developing countries requires us to use the fossil fuel of coal, and thus we are mentioning the phase down, but this wouldn't help the climate cause. Next, coming to the methane emissions. As you know, methane emissions are also important reasons for increasing global temperatures. Recently, an agreement has been undertaken in the methane arena as well. So, 25% of all the emissions, that is the greenhouse gas emissions, the 25% is from the methane. India is 80 times more potent than CO2. So this itself, it is having higher global warming potential, warrants us to reduce the emissions of methane as well to reduce the temperatures. Next, the agreement has adopted the accelerating and substantially reducing the non-carbon dioxide emissions globally. And particularly, it has mentioned the methane by 2030. So this is one of the achievements. But what is the problem is there is no clear-cut differentiation between agriculture as well as the industries. Why? Because agriculture is considered to be the major source. In India's case, for example, 80% of the methane emissions are from agriculture. Without segregating it or without differentiating it, it is difficult to target the emissions. And there is no mention of the targets in the first place to be of substantive value. There is no substantive value in terms of, for example, reducing of 5% of emissions or 10% emissions has not been committed by the countries. And on adaptation, as you know, the developing countries are pushing for adaptation as well. This has been taken into consideration by the COP28 conference. And this was an advanced step from the Glasgow summit, where there is a program for global framework for adaptation. And what is a need for adaptation is to curb or tackle the issues like water scarcity, climate resilience in terms of food and agriculture, because food and agriculture is one of the important sector which is going to be impacted on account of the increasing climate change impacts. So, what is the issue is developing countries aspiring for agreement on adaptation, but the commitments under the summit are inadequate again. Next, coming to loss and damage fund. Loss and damage fund is another important issue. Loss and damage fund is nothing but to compensate for the possible disasters that the countries are facing on account of the climate change related disastrous impacts. It might be water scarcity, it might be intensity increase in the cyclones, it might be the number of cyclones increasing, it might be the landslide, or deforestation, etc., forest fires, whatever they are. The loss and damage has been witnessed, especially among the developing countries. So that is why they have raised again and again the need for compensation to the disastrous impact that they are witnessing on account of the climate change. Several countries have committed for $800 million at the moment, but this is not at all sufficient. The money is meant to help the countries recover from the damage, but that is not sufficient. So, what we are supposed to look into is like all the previous COPs, we are still not committing any concrete targets to actually attain our climate goal. As you know, we have limited space within which we should recover from this issue. We have to do it as soon as possible. So this completes the article. Now, let us look into the next article. This article is on Kerala, where Kerala state government has accused central government that it is not giving enough fiscal space for it to avert the possible fiscal crisis. Fiscal crisis, as you know, regarding the budgeting issue, maintaining the finances of the state government. State government is arguing that the budgeting limitations imposed upon it on account of various legislations passed by the central government in the past itself, by the parliament actually, that is not providing enough space for it to borrow, to see that the expenses that are incurred by the state government are done for a sustainable running of the administration of the government or maintaining other aspects like the duties of the state government. In this, we are going to see if that criticism is valid or to what extent we have to blame either the state government or central government for the possible fiscal crisis of the state Kerala. The title of the topic is Kerala moves against government's cap on borrowing limit to Supreme Court. It actually went to Supreme Court to accuse and see that Supreme Court intervenes and resolves the issue. UPSC Relevance, Budget Management, FRBM Act, Union Government Policies affecting resource mobilization of states. Syllabus, GS Paper 3, Indian Economy, issues relating to planning mobilization. And you could also relate it to GS2, relation between center and states. The previous year questions regarding the recommendations of 14th Finance Commission. So this topic is related both to the governance issue, the jurisdictional issues, the financial issues, as well as the economic issues of the state government as well as the central government, and public expenditure management from the year 2019. Now let us jump into the issue. Firstly, the Kerala government has gone to the Supreme Court under the power vested to it under Article 131 of the Constitution, where the state government or the central government could raise an issue with respect to the disputes between the central or state or between the states. And you could go directly to the Supreme Court rather than approaching the High Court for intervention. Then it objected the imposition of borrowing limits. Borrowing limits set by the Parliament. Parliament through Fiscal Responsibility Budgetary Management Act. Under this act, state governments are supposed to limit their borrowing to a certain percentage. And beyond it, it is not allowed. Why? Because ultimately RBI manages the debt of the state government as well as central government. So you couldn't on your own exceed the borrowing limit. And what it argues is that these restrictions could actually push to the severe crisis to the state. Administration requires expenses, meeting the debt, at the same time providing services to the citizens. At the same time, expenses incurred in terms of providing salaries, pensions, etc. And it argued that it is against the fiscal federalism. That is, the cooperation between the central and state that is important according to the Kerala. But this is not in line with the fiscal federalism as the central government is not cooperating with the state government. That is the argument of the state government. Under Article 131, you could directly approach Supreme Court. That is, the state or central government could directly approach the Supreme Court. This is the original jurisdiction. This is the conceptual part. Now, what is this crisis? The crisis is Kerala argues that due to the COVID-19 breakdown that we have witnessed in the year 2020 and the fiscal policies or the central government's fiscal policies as well as the natural disasters that the Kerala is again and again witnessing. Like, for example, the Kerala floods, which has devastated Kerala. So, all these have ultimately impacted the ability of the Kerala state government to run the state as per the requirements. So, what is the issue? This ultimately led to the possibility of the severe crisis. So, what is the failure? The failure is the CAG report 2020-2021 argues that the Kerala failed in terms of meeting its revenue deficit levels, fiscal deficit levels, and debt to GSDP targets. These are all set by the Fiscal Responsibility Budgetary Management Act. Even the Kerala has passed the Kerala Fiscal Responsibility Act, and this is within the Fiscal Responsibility Budgetary Management Act, which requires all the states to pass their respective fiscal responsibility. It is to see that the fiscal consolidation is taking place because you have to maintain a particular debt level or else there is a possibility of crisis. The debt taken should be sustainable. It shouldn't lead to debt trap. Many times what we see is the possibility of debt trap. That is why we have legislations which are aimed to curtail the debts. So what Kerala debt GDP ratio stands is at the moment is 39.1%. The actual limit is 30%. Now, if you look at the entire Indian states average, it is 31%. Now, this is higher. Added to it, the major failure is due to lack of expenditure control and resource mobilization. Firstly, you have to control your expenses and see that the expenses are in consonance with the revenue that you are earning. State's revenue, as you know, one of the major sources is the taxes. Added to it, there are other ways, like for example, excise duty that is imposed upon a liquor and the excise it collects upon the petroleum selling in the states. So these are not sufficient at the moment. And at the same time, what state government has seen to be doing is it is giving sanctions to the projects without having actual funds to implement those projects. Added to it, the lack of control in terms of revenue expenditure, particularly salaries, interest, and pensions. This we are going to see as we go along in the slides. And the tax collection is not to the mark because tax collection should have been improved in tune with the expenses incurred. And the salary and pension, what as we have already seen, these are one of the important, these are one of the significant reasons for increasing expenses of the state government. After every 5 years, what we see is we revise the payment in terms of salaries and pensions to the employees of the state government. What we are saying is the Kerala government has been doing for every 5 years. This has actually increased the liability of the state. Next is Kerala government implemented the following measures for increasing the revenue. It imposed social security cess of rupees 2 on the diesel, petrol, etc. And then the cess on all India on Indian made foreign liquor in the state. Next, the fair value of the land has been increased. These measures have been taken, but the revenue collected is not up to the mark. And it is argued that the cess on petrol and diesel is actually a regressive measure. Because this impact of this cess on the petrol and diesel actually falls on the entire state citizenry, not the citizens of India, but they are living in the Kerala state, that is the residents of Kerala. And thus, poor and rich alike, everyone feels the heat of the increased inflation on account of the increased prices of the fuel. So, these steps to increase revenue is also not that prudent. Prudent measures are others. For example, you have to limit your expenses. Next, what we are going to see now is how the states could actually borrow. They could borrow in two ways. One is FRBM Act limitations, and it is set as 3% of GSDP, and it could be increased by 0.5% but based on certain conditionalities. What happens is beyond that we cannot take. That is, the state governments cannot take. But the problem with that argument is that central government could take one or the other way. Also, there are exemptions within the FRBM Act under which the limitations of this. Why? Because we cannot meet the targets all the time. For example, if there is a possibility of sudden increase in expenses on account of the disasters, then leeway should be given to the central government, and that is what it has been provided for. So, similarly, states argue that they too should be provided leeway so that they could also borrow more when in time of need. Like, for example, the present Kerala's crisis. And the other way through which the state governments could borrow is the ways and means advances. And this is to meet their temporary requirements. So, temporary gaps could be fulfilled through this route. But there is a caveat. It cannot be unlimited. If the limit is not been set on this temporary ways in which money are raised, that will ultimately impact the fiscal stability again. So, there is a limit to which they could collect. There is no need for us to go into the details of it. And the limitations is based on overall spending, revenue shortfall, and fiscal situation. On these basis, it is calculated. Obviously, it is the RBI which facilitates ways and means advances through which they could raise the loans, temporary loans, and the interest rate is set at repo rate. So this is about the two ways through which they could borrow. Now, what Kerala government is blaming is the 15th Finance Commission has reduced the divisible pool that led to reduction in the transfer of money to the state of Kerala by the centre. And it said that it led to the dropping of 1.925%. That is, the pool dropped to 1.925% of the total revenue that is shared by the central government. This actually reduces the taxes or the money, revenue that the central government collects and shares with the states. Next, the GST compensation cess has also been seized in the year 2022-2023. And so, the compensation that the states were getting from the central government because of the shortfall of revenue on account of implementation of the GST is also not due from this year. That also will lead to shortfall of approximately rupees 7,000 crore. Then, union government's policy of categorizing. So, the issue with the debt is how is the debt calculated? The calculation of debt is an issue. Certain times what state tries to do is to include the debt in off-budget borrowing and try to show that these debt do not fall under the state government. Many times what they do is they take the debt, but they do it in the name of state public sector undertakings and thus try to see that their borrowing limit has been reached despite they crossing the borrowing limit. For example, many times the discoms, as you know, distribution companies, these raise the loans, but the actual expenses are incurred by the state governments. To reduce the tariffs on electricity, what the state governments do is they take a lot of debt through the route of the discoms and see that the debt burden is not falling directly on the state government. If this debt is also included in the state government's expenses, then obviously the state government will not have the leeway to raise more money. So, but the problem is how to calculate what is debt and what is not debt. So it is subjective. And central government has time and again given clarity on how to calculate it. Even the central government is accused that it too is not calculating the budget in a prudent manner by raising money through off-budgetary sources or by showing the money as off-budgetary raisings and thus showing the debt levels at lower levels, but actually they are high. And similarly, there is a need for proper classification. It should be transparent, and this clarity will actually reduce the possibility of tinkering or manipulating the numbers to show that they are following the book. That is what I have raised here regarding the off-budget borrowings. Recently, what we have done is we have included even the off-budget borrowings within the state government's debt. That is leading to higher debts. Why? Because earlier they used to somehow manipulate the numbers by showing the expenses as off-budget borrowings. That is showing the borrowings as off-budget borrowings. But now that is not possible. Even now, the clear-cut classification is not existent. Next, the analysis is Kerala's share might have been declined on account of the Finance Commission recommendation, but at the same time, what we could also say is that it has got back some part of it through the devolutions, the increasing devolutions. That is the post-devolution revenue deficit grants. So this is one route through which it is being compensated. And most of the budget of the Kerala is going to revenue expenditure, which is not a good measure. There are two expenses, One is revenue expenditure, the other is the capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure should be incurred from within the ability of the state to raise revenues. And beyond it, whatever the money that is borrowing, it has to be mostly spent to capital expenses. This is how you could maintain the debt in a sustainable way. And the capital expenses, as you know, has an ability to create infrastructure which has the effect to create more opportunities in terms of development. But what we are seeing in most of the states are they are incurring expenses in the revenue arena where they are trying to satisfy the needs of the citizenry to garner votes, but they are not thinking about the future. Similarly is the case with the state, Kerala. Next, the discontinuation of GST compensation obviously is an issue. It has to be resolved. Then there should be clear-cut norms with regards to what comes under borrowing and what doesn't come under borrowing, as we already seen in the past slides. So this completes the analysis. Now let us look into another article. Center is trying to revise the plan so that the GST administration could be easier. As you know, GST is a decisive step in terms of reformation in the indirect tax collection. There is a need for certain changes to make it more effective. So that is what we are going to see in it. The issues that the GST administration is facing at the moment and how to actually improve its collection and make it more easier for whoever are paying the GST tax. Okay. So the title of the topic is The Center Revises Plan to Simplify GST Rates. And it is a topic related to GST and tax reforms. In UPSC syllabus, GS paper 3, Indian economy, resource mobilization. As GST is ultimately collected by the center and obviously it will distribute with the states as well. Certain part is collected by the center, certain parts by the states, etc. and certain integrated. We are not going to go into the details. We are only trying to understand how the GST could be further improved in terms of its implementation. We have previous year questions on GST as well, as you know. Enumerate the indirect taxes which have been subsumed in GST in India, etc., which has come in the year 2017. And also the questions related to GST have come in the year 2020 as well as 2017 as well. Now the context, the government has actually reconstituted a ministerial group which will look into the way in which the complex tax structure could be reduced. The complexity involved in the taxation under GST is because multiple tax rates are imposed under GST regime. One of the reasons for bringing GST is to reduce the complexity involved in imposition of tax rates, right? For example, certain goods invite the taxation of 2% or 4%, etc., etc. So removing these so that the implementation or execution could be easier is one of the reason why we brought GST in the first place. But within the GST as well, we have multiple taxation, multiple tax slabs. Like zero also is one of the tax rates that certain goods invite. So the problem here is to categorize the goods on which various taxes are imposed. Certain times, for example, a good might invite zero tax under GST regime. At the same time, if it is packed, then it will invite so and so tax rate. And then, if the same good is sold in the hotel, etc., it might invite other tax rate. So this confusion around the extent of taxes to be paid, etc., will be ultimately borne by the taxpayer. It might be the business, or it might be any retailer, it might be hotel industry, whatever. So there is a need for simplifying it. Again and again, critics have argued that there is a necessity to bring in uniform tax structure rather than having these multiple tax slabs, which makes implementation difficult because ultimately the compliance, that is how to pay, becomes difficult to various entities involved in business. So that is one proposal now which is going on. And the other is the government also moved legislation to hasten the process of setting up GST appellate tribunals. So whatever the issues that the taxpayers are facing and the claim that the government imposes upon them, certain times they dispute it, right? For example, if government comes to me and asks me to pay so and so GST tax, but I am of the view that I'm not supposed to pay that amount of tax, then I should be provided a mechanism to resolve that issue. And after resolution, I might not like the verdict. So I also want a GST appellate tribunal where I could see that my grievances are addressed. So that is also ongoing at the moment. Now, what is GST? GST is a uniform tax, indirect tax that is imposed upon the entire country, right? So it is the indirect tax that is levied on both the goods and services. How it is brought? It is brought through 101 Constitutional Amendment Act. As you know, it requires various changes in the constitutional provisions. And we are not going to go into those details. And the key features. What are the key features? It is on the entire territory of India. So earlier what we had is the tax rates varied at the central level, at the state level, because state have also the right to impose taxes and they imposed varied tax rates. Thus there was different taxation in the different states, making the market segregated. But now GST has unified it. So it was believed that it will remove certain issues like, for example, black marketing. If a good is priced higher in the other states on account of the higher tax imposed by that particular state, there is a possibility that the individuals from the adjacent states or wherever the good prices might be lower will try to smuggle it illegally, which is illegal to sell it in other states without getting registered in that state, etc. So all these issues are resolved through GST. And it is a destination-based tax. Okay? Because earlier, the taxation collected by the producer state was higher. But now it is a destination-based tax, that is whichever the state that ultimately buys the good, there the tax is imposed rather than where it is produced. So that is why various states who are manufacturers have raised issues that if we come in the ambit of GST, then we will not be able to collect the extent of taxes that we were collecting earlier. So it is a disincentive for the producer states. So that is why we have GST compensation cess, that the center wishes to alleviate the concerns raised by these states. So in this way, we try to address the concerns of the states, the producer states, because the tax is consumption-based tax. And the present government is also looking into the GST compensation cess issues as well. As many times what we have seen is the center hasn't paid the complete the revenue shortfall that these states experienced. Of course, there is one particular rate that the central government has agreed upon in terms of paying those states which are losing revenue on account of complying with GST. The concerns are input tax credit. Input tax credit is nothing but the tax that is the tax credit that is provided to the input. Okay, input in the sense, for example, if I am a producer, I use the inputs to produce, right? Inputs, for example, inputs are nothing but the raw materials. And in that process, I pay the tax as well, right? Because I am buying the products. And then I will use these raw materials to transform into a product and sell it. But even this product invites a tax. So instead of paying tax on the input as well as on the output, what we do is on the inputs, the government will give the uh, duty back. Whatever the tax that you are paying, it will give it back, which is called input tax credit. And this could be collected by retailers or producers, right? Because they need not pay the tax twice. So this issue is also one of the prime issue faced by the payees of the GST. This has to be solved. Then we have exemption of 5 petroleum products: crude, petrol, diesel, ATF, natural gas. At the same time, we have alcohol, etc. These are all exempt from GST structure at the moment. Many states as well as citizens recommend that there is a need for uniformity even in those goods. And there are many tax rates, as we already seen. There is a need to simplify the tax rates. Next, there is absence of appellate mechanism, which the government is undertaking at the moment. And the last issue is compensation to states, as we already seen in the previous slide. We have explained in detail why certain states have fears of the shortfall of revenue on account of this implementation of GST. The way forward, there is a need for rationally considering to ease the doing of business. Why? Because ultimately we have brought in GST to ease the business, how to do the business. Ultimately, as you know, input tax credit issue or the multiple tax rates impacts our ability to do the business easily on account of issue in compliance as well as assessing the extent of taxes that they are supposed to pay to the government. So this completes the article. Now let us look into another article. This article is on global partnership on AI, where various countries have collaborated to utilize the AI for the social good. For that, there is a requirement for standardization of AI. And at the same time, how to regulate the AI usage in the first place or AI development in the first place. Because without collaboration among various countries, we cannot expect the technology like AI to be regulated in a proper manner. Because AI has a transnational impact and utilization of AI requires, and the utilization of AI is done by different countries that has collaboration with the rest of the world for development, usage, etc. We need a collaboration among different countries for regulating it. Now, the title of the topic is New Delhi Declaration on Artificial Intelligence adopted. So, it has been adopted. What we are going to see is about the artificial intelligence and global partnership on artificial intelligence. And for syllabus, GS paper 3, Science and Tech. The context, as we already seen, that global partnership on artificial intelligence has been adopted by 29 partner countries as a part of the New Delhi Declaration on Artificial Intelligence. So the name such is the session was conducted in New Delhi and it has been accepted and it was done by 29 member countries. That is important fact. Now the guiding principles of New Delhi Declaration on AI are inclusiveness, as the name itself suggests. It wants to see that the benefits are spread to various sections of the society, not excluding any particular section, so that the development has an inclusive impact. Human centricity, as we have already seen, that humanitarian aspect has been taken into account, especially given the widespread fears among the population that the AI could have devastating impact upon the individual rights, because it collects a lot of data and it generates responses on the collected data, and also the automated ability of artificial intelligence to utilize its intelligence through cognition, etc. But ultimately, the kind of knowledge created or the kind of application of technology should be such that it should take into consideration the fears among the population, the possibility of violation of the rights of the individuals, or the possibility of monopolization of the technologies by developed countries or few rich sections. So that is why inclusiveness and humanitarian aspect is important. Then the sustainability, the utilization of the technology should be of importance and utility to not only the present generation but also the future generation. So there are fears also that the AI could take over and it has higher intelligence when compared to human beings, and thus regulation of the extent of intelligence or the utilization of the intelligence developed by AI is also important. Then comes a transparency issue, that is whether the regulations framed are transparent enough so that everyone could uh, easily understand, easily view how it is being regulated. So clarity is important in how it is developed, the extent of intelligence that it has, etc. Next, the accountability when the regulations are not being followed strictly by the companies, especially given the fears among the people that the corporate companies or corporates are stretching it too far beyond their ability to regulate or control the artificial intelligence potentials or capabilities. The key objectives of the declaration are as follows. Firstly, the need for collaboration among various countries regarding the research in AI, development and deployment, that is utilization. Then also, we have tackling the current challenges faced in the utilization of AI. Sometimes what we have seen is AI commenting absurdly on race. Now, it has its own intelligence, but its intelligence is also formed on the basis of the past knowledge that it gains. And the past knowledge might have certain prejudices, and thus projecting this prejudice on the entire population's analysis and trying to give a view on aspects of human society, and thus it might have an impact on its ability to understand society, right? Because it is all dependent upon the knowledge that it is gained or the kind of projections that it is forming on account of the way in which it processes the information. Next, the benefits of AI are widely accessible. That is one of the goal, as we already seen, inclusivity and human centricity, etc., and minimize the potential risks that we have already dealt in the ways the AI could have a harmful impact as well. Now, what is global partnership on artificial intelligence? It is to see that the usage of AI is in a responsible manner, and the genesis is in the year 2020 within the frame of G7. G7, as you know, a group of 7 countries, US, UK, etc., and 15 members have given the initiation of this global partnership on artificial intelligence. As you know, you might confuse that it is just 7 countries, but many times, almost all the time, the G7, when they are conducting any meeting, they also invite various other countries. Then comes the goals of global partnership of on AI, as we already seen, bridging the gap between the theory and practice and cutting edge research, etc. We have already seen in the past slides. Now, the members total of 29 countries, as you already seen, from the North and South America, Europe, Asia, who are part of the GPA. The founding members, 15, as we already seen. India is also part among them. And the important thing that you should notice here, China is not a member at all at the moment. So this is important. And this also leads to fears among various countries that maybe China is not trying to cooperate with other countries with regards to regulation of the AI. That is an important issue that is the countries are facing at the moment. The headquarters is in Paris, which is OECD in Paris. Then comes the summits. This is the third summit at the moment, which is conducted in Delhi. The rest 2 summits that have been conducted are in Montreal, Paris, and Tokyo. Next, the recent developments with regards to artificial intelligence regulation. We have a blessed declaration, which is the documents which outline the principles that are to be adopted for developing and deploying of the artificial intelligence. This is signed by 28 countries and the European Union in the year November 2023. Then comes EU AI Act, where EU is trying to bring a comprehensive legislation on AI so that it could regulate it, and obviously it is to minimize the risks. Next, US AI Bill of Rights is also being framed at the moment, has been introduced. This outlines the individual rights and the protections related to AI usage. As you have seen again and again, the emphasis being given on the individual rights that could be possibly violated on account of misuse of AI or the way in which it is being developed. This completes the article. Now, let us look into the prelims practice questions. A report has been released recently that the road accidents has led to higher deaths among Indians. The worldwide trend is the deaths from the accidents is actually declining, whereas the India's case is unique, where we are seeing rise in the deaths due to road accidents. This is a report released by the WHO. We are going to see the ways through which we could reduce the road accidents. The title is Road Fatalities Rise in India Despite Global Drop, a report given by WHO. Relevance, obviously, the report, Global Status Report on Road Safety 2023, and the Brasilia Declaration. Brasilia Declaration is one of the important declarations where various countries have agreed to take measures to reduce the accidents. Mains GS Paper 1, Urbanization, their problems and their remedies. The context. The report released by the WHO. What are the findings? Global level, we have seen a decline of 5% in terms of deaths reporting in 2021 in comparison to 2010. Okay, and it is limited to 1.19 million annually at the moment. Now, what the thing is that road crash is the major reason for the deaths and of the age group 5 to 29. And what we have seen is two-thirds of the death are to the working age related individuals. Then comes the 9 out of 10 road traffic deaths occur in the low and middle income countries. So this is one of the important things that you could notice, that the low and middle income countries are witnessing higher deaths due to road accidents. And this despite the fact that the developed countries have more automobiles in terms of the numbers. And that is only 1% of the world's motor vehicles are owned by the low and middle income countries, yet we see higher deaths among them. India's case, what we have seen is 15% rise in terms of road accident related deaths, that from the year 2010 to 2021. And India's share at the global level is 11 to 13%. That is how it has increased from 2010 to 2021. So this is a worrisome aspect that we have to deal about it. So Brazilian declaration, as we already seen, it is the commitment from the various countries around the world to reduce the road accidents by taking certain measures. It was agreed in the year 2015 so that they could make certain changes in the legislations, adopting sustainable transport, strengthening post-crash response, etc. by 2030. And this is one of the part of UN Sustainable Development Goals, which was adopted in the year 2015, as we already seen. India's case, India has also decided to take measures to reduce the accidents by half by the year 2024. Now we have extended it to 2030 because we are clearly not able to reduce them. Now let us look into ways through which we could actually reduce the road accidents. Firstly, education related measures, as the name will suggest, we need to educate them regarding how to ply on the road or how to drive the vehicles, the speed levels or the kind of complying or the measures like complying to the signals, giving proper indication while driving on the roads, etc. So creating public awareness is important. Then comes requiring a certification course for road safety auditors. So road safety auditors who are conducting the road safety measures and giving a go-ahead to the usage of that particular road should be given proper knowledge, should be imparted with proper knowledge so that they could actually conduct the audit thoroughly of the roads and then give permission to that particular road rather than allowing it for usage. Next, engineering related measures. What are the engineering related measures? You have to integrate road safety in road design. Road safety is a must. Despite not having road safety related requirements, various roads are still used. That is leading to a lot of accidents. As you could see, one of the reasons, the black spots, where the accidents are repeated. Okay, and yet we are not resolving those roads, black spots. Then conducting road safety audits is a must. That is required. Then we have accidental spots, as we already seen, black spots. Next, we have to mandate safety measures for vehicles regarding the pollution or regarding the brakes, etc., etc. So government is coming up with various regulations, but complying is the issue. The next, enforcement measures, we have to strengthen regulations through the Motor Vehicle Act. Then at the same time, electronic monitoring and enforcement of the road safety is to be done. Next comes the emergency care. The Good Samaritans, who are the first ones to assist the road accident victims, should be given some effective legislative assistance. For example, they should not be bothered about the registration of FIR. They should be given monetary assistance in terms of helping the victims. If they help the victims, they should be given assistance. For example, Delhi government has come up with the act. Similarly, other state governments have also come with various acts that has to be done as a mandatory thing, and so that helping becomes easy, especially given the importance of the golden hour, where there is high chance of saving the road accident related victims. Then comes the providing ambulance to toll plazas on national highways so that they could easily reach to the accident spots. As you know, the national highways also witness high amount of accidents, so we could reduce them. So this is about this article. Now let us look into another article. Consider the following statement. GST reform was implemented through 101st Constitutional Amendment Act. This is true. Next, GST is a destination-based tax. This too is true, as we already seen in the explanation part. So, how many of the above statements are correct? Both the statements are correct, so the answer is C. The second one, match the following: fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, and primary deficit. Now, let us look into it one by one. Firstly, difference between fiscal deficit and interest payments is nothing but primary deficit. So, fourth is A. Next, difference between revenue deficit and grant for creation of capital assets. It is effective revenue deficit. So, 3 is B. Difference when projected revenue, actual revenue. So difference between projected revenue and actual revenue, it is revenue deficit. So the 2 is C. Obviously 1 is D. So 1D, 2C, 3B, 4A. So the answer is A. Now, with respect to COP28, which of the following is correct? Adopted the agreement of tripling the renewable energy of all nations individually by 2030. This is false, because it's a global level target, not individual national level targets of different nations. Adopted the agreement doubling of annual improvements in energy efficiency of all the nations individually by 2030. This too is false. Here too we have mentioned individually. Next, agreed to set up the loss and damage fund to help countries trying to recover from climate induced disasters. This is false, because we have operationalized the already conceptualized loss and damage fund, and countries have also committed to this fund. Next, first time acknowledge the need to move away from fossil fuels. This is true. This is the important step taken in this particular summit. So the answer is D. Next, Global Status Report on Road Safety 2023 was recently released by World Health Organization, as we already see. Consider the following statements about the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. It was launched in 2020 with primary goal of bridging the gap between theory and practice in AI. This is true, as you already seen it. China is one of the founding members. Actually, China is not a member of GPAI, and it is an important issue raised by various countries. The fourth GPAI summit is being held in New Delhi, following the first 3 summits in Montreal, Paris, and Tokyo. This is true. So the answer is 1 and 2 only. Which of the statements given is above or correct? The answer is 1 and 3 only, A. Next, carbon emission reduction, carbon avoidance, and carbon absorption are equally important to achieve the global climate aspirations. Comment. Yes, all are important. Carbon emission reduction is reducing the amount of carbons released into the air. Avoidance means we have to avoid the emission of carbon into the air. That is, for example, if we want to produce energy, instead of producing energy through fossil fuels, it is better to produce energy through renewable sources. Carbon absorption means already the carbon which has been emitted into the air, we have to reduce it. For example, carbon capture and utilization storage, CCUS method. So in this way, we could, in a way, comprehensively reduce the carbon in the atmosphere. So all the processes are important. In the introduction, write down about the Paris climate commitment, where the countries have committed to reduce the emissions, and each has brought its own intended nationally determined contribution to show their climate commitments. Write why there is a strong need for climate intervention, as we have already crossed the 1 degree Celsius mark. We are supposed to limit by 2 degrees Celsius, and that requires action right now rather than planning for the future later. So, actually bring the conceptual difference between the 3 of them, as we have already explained you what they are, and significance of all the 3. Try to add proper examples to show how the usage of coal, etc., lead to higher proportion of carbon emissions. For that, we need to avoid usage of the coal in the near future, etc. Explain how 3 strategies complement each other, because they are comprehensive in nature. Not only avoiding emissions, we are absorbing them. At the same time, we are also utilizing various ways to produce energy rather than use the carbon mechanisms. And discuss the need for the holistic approach, because one fit approach is not enough given the gravity of the issue that we are facing. In the conclusion, write down the importance of integrating the carbon emission reductions and absorption, and also emphasize on the collective responsibility of the governments, because you cannot expect one particular country to solve all the issues. All the countries are one of the reasons for the present crisis. All should collaborate. It is a global problem, and individual efforts with collaboration with others is the only way forward. Added to it, the industries, individuals, civil society, etc., all possible stakeholders should come forward and contribute their own part to actually reduce the climate crisis that we are facing at the moment. So this completes the daily news analysis. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.